Hey everyone, welcome back. So today we're going to be going over Generative Energy podcast number 5 between Danny Roddy and Georgy Dinkov. Now this is going to be a long one. I can't do it on video this time, so hopefully the audio recording is fine. So let's get right into it. We're going to be talking about several different topics. This is part 3, and let's just get right into it. People hear scalp massage regrows hair and assume it's increasing ATP and improving circulation. But as Georgie and Danny point out, most of these intense scalp wounding methods aren't building energy, they're triggering inflammation. Historically, hair loss manuals going back to the 1800s all pushed hard, painful scalp massages. And every time the argument was the same: the more irritation and redness, the better the regrowth. That's because inflammation releases nitric oxide and estrogen-linked growth signals. So yes, if you inflame the scalp, you might see temporary boost in follicle activity. The tissue swells, blood flow increases, and some dormant hairs can appear to wake up. But, and this is the key point, that's not regeneration. That's the same logic as injured tissue so it looks fuller. It's a stress response. Inflammation can give short-term stimulation, but chronically irritating the scalp also risks fibrosis, calcification, and poorer tissue energy over time. Wounding to hair growth is basically borrowing from tomorrow at a high interest rate. Healthier hair grows from a metabolically supported scalp. A good thyroid function, low stress hormones, good blood sugar handling, nutrients, light, and oxygen, not by deliberately injuring the tissue and calling the swelling progress. So the question isn't, does massage work? The question is why it appears to work and whether you want temporary inflamed hairs or a scalp that actually is alive, nourished, and energetic long term. And so this brings us to another big topic in the hair world, and that's hormones and the scalp. People online love talking about DHT blockers, but Georgie and Danny made an interesting point here. Spironolactone and progesterone might be working through the same hormonal doorway, the mineralocorticoids receptor. Spironolactone is known as an anti-androgen, but as Georgie explained, it also blocks the mineralocorticoid receptor, and it has anti-estrogen and anti-aromatase actions, and even competes with testosterone at the 5-alpha reductase. I'm like mumbling over my words right now. So somebody on a forum used 100 to 200 milligrams daily and saw a dramatic regrowth. And Georgie's point was, sure, but that's a very strong hormonal signal. Here's the twist. So progesterone, the body's natural calming steroid, binds that same receptor even stronger than spironolactone does. So the idea isn't just block DHT and then hair magically regrows. It's reduce stress hormones, reduce excess aldosterone like signaling, oppose estrogen dominance in the scalp, and create a low inflammation, pro-energy environment for follicles. And here's where it gets interesting. Progesterone, when used properly in a good carrier like vitamin E, may deliver similar benefits to spironolactone without hammering the body in the same way. So what does that mean for your hair? If spironolactone works partly because it blocks stress hormone pathways and progesterone naturally calms those same pathways, then the future of hair loss might not be stronger blockers. It might just be about restoring hormonal balance and energy in the scalp, not just suppressing and fighting biology. That's a much more long-term physiological way to think about hair, and it lines up perfectly with the bioenergetic view. So if the theme here is for like real regeneration and it comes from energy, not stress, that applies to the brain too. Burnout isn't just I worked out too hard and I need a vacation. As Georgie and Danny explain, modern burnout looks a lot like serotonin-driven subclinical depression. Not the classic sadness and tears picture, more like if you feel zombified, you drift through your day and on autopilot. You stare at a wall and lose track of time. You're not exactly sad, you're just not really there. That flat, foggy, checked out feeling. That's not motivation running out. It's the brain stuck in survival mode, with serotonin acting like a chemical brake on energy and drive. And here's the kicker. SSRI and antidepressants boosts serotonin even more, and they often don't help the burnout. But anti-serotonin compounds like cyproheptadine or monasterin have been used successfully in research and clinical settings, because instead of numbing you, they help remove that biochemical block or fog. Now, we don't need drugs to grasp the principle. When serotonin dominates, the brain thinks it's under siege. When energy and dopamine rise, the brain reconnects to life again. So, what are gentler, everyday ways to shift the chemistry? Bright light and daylight lower serotonin naturally. Warm meals with carbs and protein fuels brain energy. Good digestion, less endotoxin, less serotonin. Magnesium, salt, and thyroid support if needed. Gentle movement, but not punishing workouts. Burnout isn't mental weakness, it's a metabolic traffic jam in the brain. You fix your energy, clear serotonin overload, and you don't just feel less stressed, you wake back up. And speaking of the body hitting the brakes, there's another sign your system is stuck in stress chemistry, a long refractory period. Georgie and Danny break it down simply. When recovering after sex takes a long time, it's often not aging, it's prolactin. Prolactin rises when the body thinks it needs to conserve energy. When stress hormones are elevated or when thyroid function is low, even a small drop in active thyroid hormone, which is T3, can send prolactin up fast. Doctors sometimes jump straight to dopamine drugs, but there's a more foundational approach. The first step is to test, not guess. Test. Test your prolactin, thyroid panel, especially free T3, liver and kidney markers because they clear prolactin, vitamin D and calcium status. Once you know the numbers, the path becomes simple. You support thyroid, stress hormones drop, prolactin falls, sexual function and recovery improve. And the tools are pretty accessible. Good thyroid support, sunlight and vitamin D, adequate calcium, aspirin for stress chemistry, and progesterone or vitamin E if needed to calm the endocrine system. It's not about forcing the body with stimulation. It's about removing the chemical signals that say we don't have enough energy, so you're going to need to slow down. When metabolism comes back online, so does everything else that's downstream, including sexual recovery. Because biology doesn't lie, a fast bounce back is a sign of safety and surplus energy. Now, let's shift from hormones to something way more comforting, and that is protein. Most people think all protein shakes are the same, but Georgie and Danny highlight something special about casein. Unlike whey, which hits fast, spikes insulin, and can feel jittery or stimulating, casein behaves more like a calming, steady fuel. And why is that? So they point out that casein acts a bit like a mixed opioid receptor modulator, similar in feel to a very gentle naltrexone-like effect. It can lower stress chemistry, reduce brain tryptophan entry, and ultimately help lower serotonin, and it will not raise it. That's why some people say casein feels soothing and even sleep-friendly, whereas they leave them wired or hungry again fast. And here's the kicker. Casein isn't just neutral on serotonin. It actually helps your body excrete extra tryptophan instead of converting it into more serotonin. Add a little gelatin or BCAAs, and that calming profile gets even stronger. It's like sending your nervous system a gentle message. You're safe, we have steady fuel, no need to stress right now. So the next time you think protein is just protein, remember, whey is the quick ignition spark, casein is the warm fireplace that keeps the system stable. For people who run anxious, wired, inflamed, or can't sleep well, a slow anti-stress protein before bed might be the quiet game changer that you need. So we always hear ketones are the superior fuel. The brain loves ketones. But Georgie and Danny make a very different point, and the context definitely matters here. At rest, your muscles can run on fat just fine. But the moment you need real performance like speed, strength, and mental reaction, the body switches to glucose as the preferred fuel because glucose gives fast, clean ATP when you actually need energy. And here's where the myth really breaks. The brain doesn't prefer ketones. It can use ketones, but mostly in emergency states when glucose isn't available. Ketones show up when the body thinks food is scarce. That's a survival signal, not peak performance signal. Think about it like this. If ketones were the ultimate brain fuel, your cognition would improve during fasting, low carb, and starvation. But what do most people feel? Brain fog, slower reaction time, irritability, reduced creativity, that running on fumes vibe. And Georgie brings up an important biochemical clue. When ketones rise, the ratio between beta hydroxybutyrate and acetoacetate shifts. The ratio reflects the cell's redox state, and in stress, it moves in a way that looks a lot like a temporary diabetic state. In other words, ketones aren't always a bonus fuel. Sometimes they're a sign the system is struggling to oxidize glucose and is reaching for backup power. So when do ketones make sense? Short strategic windows where they act as a supportive bridge, but not as a permanent primary fuel source. When do they signal trouble? When they show up because the body is saying, we don't have enough glucose to run fast, think sharply, or recover well. The real flex isn't running on ketones full time. The real flex is having the metabolic flexibility to use ketones briefly, but always come back to strong, steady glucose metabolism as home base. That's where cognition, libido, performance, and longevity live, not in survival mode, but in energy abundance mode. Now let's talk about something surprising that came up. They were talking about using nicotine as a metabolism booster. On paper, it actually sounds pretty clever. Nicotine lowers aromatase. It boosts dopamine by inhibiting MAO-B and can feel stimulating and motivating. Georgie and Danny acknowledge that short term, those effects can look appealing. You feel sharp, you feel a little charged up, and there's a temporary sense of metabolic speed, but there is a catch, and it's a big one. Nicotine raises free fatty acids in the blood, it kicks the stress hormones up, and mimics the physiology of a fight or flight workout, even if you're still sitting still. That's not clean energy. That's adrenaline-driven fuel release, a stress metabolism, not a healthy one. And when this happens over and over, you start burning through the system the same way. A car runs hot when it's redlined all day. Even worse, mixing caffeine and nicotine can send lipolysis and stress hormones sky high. That jittery, shaky crash and crave feeling, that's your body saying, this isn't suitable fuel. So yes, nicotine can give you a quick bump, but it comes with the same metabolic signature as chronic stress. And for long-term thyroid hormonal balance and nervous system stability, you don't want to chase the artificial stimulation. You want true metabolic strength, warmth, steady mood, good sleep, and solid appetite to calm the focus. If someone insists on experimenting, Georgie suggests to keep it extremely low, like maybe 1 to 2 milligrams, and to not use it daily. But the bigger picture is this. A system that runs well doesn't need nicotine to turn on. Healthy metabolism is already on. Real energy feels calm, grounded, and capable, not wired and buzzing. Gut trouble can feel like a never-ending guessing game. Trying a supplement, feel a little better, crash, repeat again. And that's exactly why this part of the conversation mattered. Georgie and Danny basically say, stop the supplement roulette and verify what's actually going on first. Do you suspect H. pylori? Don't just treat based on symptoms. Get the breath test or stool antigen test. If it's positive, follow the proven medical combo therapy. H. pylori is stubborn. Herbs and half strategies often aren't enough. I think it might be SIBO instead. There's a breath test for that too. And if it's confirmed, the evidence-based routine is rifaximin, not random blends that may irritate the gut even more. Now, here's the nuance. If a person actually has an ulcer, but not H. pylori, hammering the gut with antibiotics can make things worse. In that case, acid reduction first. Think famotidine to let the tissue calm down and heal. And they add one more layer most people miss. Check vitamin D and endocrine markers. Low vitamin D, low thyroid, or high stress hormones make it harder for the gut lining to regenerate and harder for antibiotics to even work properly. So the decision path becomes simple. Test, do the breath, stool, basic labs. Step 2, treat the confirmed issue, not the guess. Step 3, support the system, vitamin D, thyroid health, calm the gut lining. Step 4, stop bouncing between supplements, hoping you hit the right one. Because the gut doesn't heal through panic and trial and error, it heals when you know what you're targeting and support the body so it can finish the job. Let's shift gears into something that sounds complex, but they made surprisingly simple, keeping the blood fluid and preventing clots without jumping straight to heavy anticoagulants. The usual medical approach, it's warfarin, strong blood thinners, constant monitoring, sometimes necessary, absolutely, but Georgie and Danny point out biological levers that work upstream of clotting by reducing the signals that tell the blood to get sticky in the first place. First, serotonin isn't just a mood chemical. In the bloodstream, it actually promotes clotting. So anything that blocks serotonin's peripheral effects naturally thins the blood. That's why compounds like cyproheptadine show anti-clot benefits. Next, famotidine, yes, the heartburn medicine has a documented side effect. It thins the blood too. Then there's carbon dioxide, producing more CO2 through nasal breathing, light exercise, bag breathing, etc. A powerful natural anti-clot signal in the body. Add progesterone and vitamin E to the list, and both help calm stress chemistry and keep the blood moving smoothly. And one more overlooked angle is endotoxin. When the gut leaks inflammatory endotoxin into circulation, the body goes into defense mode. Coagulate, lock down, and wall off the danger. Lower endotoxin with things like charcoal, cooked carrots. I don't know if they meant cooked carrots, but no, it would be like the raw carrots, raw carrot salad, good digestion and stress reduction, and blood naturally becomes less reactive. The message here isn't ditch your doctor and pop alternatives. It's that clotting isn't random. It's chemistry signaling we're under threat. The safer you are metabolically, the calmer your gut and stress hormones, the more naturally fluid your blood becomes. Instead of forcing the body with pharmaceutical sledgehammer, these are ways to remove the reasons the body is trying to clot in the first place. Now let's circle back to the scalp, because this part clears up a huge misconception in the hair loss world. People online love to say balding scalps are fibrotic. You need to break up the fibrosis, and that leads to all kinds of extreme mechanical ideas like digging, scraping, needling, pressure devices. But Danny and Georgie make an important distinction. In many cases, it's not hardcore scar tissue fibrosis first, it's soft tissue calcification. Calcium gets deposited in tissue when energy is low, and stress hormones, especially cortisol via mineralocorticoid signaling, are chronically elevated. That stiff, crunchy, tight scalp feeling isn't always scar tissue. It's often mineralized tissue from chronic stress metabolism. And here's where the thinking flips. Instead of trying to break the tissue, the smarter move is to remineralize it properly and restore metabolism in the scalp. That's why Georgie mentions things like vitamin K and progesterone. They help move calcium out of the soft tissue and put it where it actually belongs, which would be your bones. And instead of jumping straight to biopsies and even mention a simpler tool, electrical conductance testing, because calcified tissue conducts poorly. It's a cleaner way to confirm what's really happening without cutting into your scalp. The deeper message here, balding isn't your scalp getting tight by mystery, it's the biology of stress. If cortisol's up, mineral signaling is up, local energy is down. So the fix isn't to attack the scalp, it's to improve metabolic balance, lower chronic stress chemistry, support calcium metabolism, and bring the tissue back to life. Hair grows from living, energized tissue, not irritated or traumatic tissues. And if the scalp is calcified, the answer isn't force, it's restoration. Next, they touched on alcohol recovery, and this one hits home for a lot of people. We tend to think the hardest part of quitting alcohol is the first week, the shakes, the cravings, but Georgie and Danny point out something deeper. The real battle is the metabolic state after withdrawal. Even when someone stops drinking, the body often stays in a stress chemistry pattern for months, sometimes up to a full year. Cortisol stays high, prolactin stays elevated, and dopamine stays low. And that state, that biochemical burnout, is what drives relapse, not weak willpower. A stressed, depleted brain trying to self-medicate energy back. So instead of white-knuckling sobriety, they suggest supporting the system so it can truly reset. Pregnenolone, which they're recommending between 30 and 50 milligrams to soften the stress response. Progesterone plus a low-dose DHEA to rebalance steroid hormones. Aspirin to lower inflammatory stress signals. Vitamin D to support liver repair and mood. And actually checking endocrine labs, not just guessing. Because when cortisol falls, when prolactin drops, when dopamine rises again, the cravings fade, life feels doable again, and it's not forced. The message is powerful. Relapse isn't a moral failure, it's physiology. You don't tough your way out of alcohol chemistry. You rebuild metabolism, restore balance, and give the brain the tools to feel normal again without reaching for a drink. And finally, let's talk about something almost everyone in the metabolic space has heard. Metformin is the miracle longevity drug. But Georgie and Danny flip the narrative on its head. Yes, metformin lowers blood sugar. Yes, it's prescribed everywhere, but how it works matters. And they point out something most people never hear. Metformin pushes the body into a mild lactic acidosis state and forces more fat oxidation. That isn't better metabolism. That's stress metabolism, the same chemistry you see in low oxygen, illness, or extreme exertion. Instead of improving fuel handling, it can mimic a state where the body can't use glucose properly, and a long term that's not repairing diabetes, that's compensating for it. That's why, despite all the hype, metformin hasn't been shown to magically reverse diabetes complications or extend human lifespan reliably. Meanwhile, aspirin, which is a dirt cheap, old school molecule, can improve insulin sensitivity, lower inflammation, and support better glucose use without forcing the body into a stress fuel state. And that's the theme today, isn't it? Lowering a number, glucose, hair shedding, inflammation, it's not the same as healing the system. Metformin can drop blood sugar the same way overtraining can drop blood sugar by stressing the body into squeezing out fuel. True metabolic improvement doesn't feel like strain. It feels like warmth, stable energy, good digestion, clear mood, strong sleep. The question isn't how do we lower glucose? The real question is how do we make the body want to use glucose again? And when you support metabolism instead of forcing chemistry, the numbers, the energy, and the health, they all follow.